You've watched the people, felt the passion and heard the politicians. Now it's time for some perspective. On this show today, we discuss what it will take to create an effective anti-corruption authority. This show has a large cast of characters. Retired Justice A.P. Shah comes from a family of lawyers, but he broke tradition when during his tenure as Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court, he decriminalized homosexuality. The activist judge refers to some powers of the Jan Lokpal as absurd. Arun Bhatia has spent a lifetime fighting corruption from within the system. The retired IAS officer and former Municipal Commissioner of Pune believes the Lokpal should go after all kinds of corruption, big and small. He's lived many lives in one. Member of the team that built the Pentium processor, amongst India's first few telecom entrepreneurs, and now chairman of Jupiter Capital that has interests in infrastructure, technology and media. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, a Rajya Sabha MP, has introduced the Jan Lokpal Bill as a private member's bill in Parliament. Amit Desai is a senior advocate with more than 20 years of experience in criminal, economic and revenue laws. He says focus the Lokpal on cases of big-ticket corruption. Few people know the corridors of North Block as well as Ashok Jha does. The career bureaucrat and now independent chairman of MCXSX says the Lokpal needs to recognize the anatomy of corruption in India. Teresa Hamilton is Deputy Commissioner at the Independent Commission Against Corruption in New South Wales, Australia. She says enhanced investigative powers are necessary to fight corruption. Hewitt Ming is head of the Regulatory Compliance and Investigations Group at law firm DLA Piper in Hong Kong, a city that has successfully fought corruption since 1974. And watching this drama from the outside, in a sense playing critic for us, is Gautam Patel. Lawyer, environmentalist and columnist Gautam Patel says he's violently allergic to bad writing. That's probably why he hasn't taken kindly to any version of the Lokpal bill. Yet Patel's column, comparing the three versions, is the most detailed I have seen. And so he kindly agreed to join me and translate the legal mumbo-jumbo into English. To start with, I'd like to refer to your opening line in a 4-page treatise that you wrote on corruption. And you said that the Lokpal runs the risk of becoming its own worst enemy. Why is it that you felt that way?
The Jan Lokpal bill contemplates a body that arrogates to itself far too much power concentrated into one place. That itself could be another form of corruption. That's the first point. On the flip side, the government Lokpal bill doesn't do nearly enough. So then that's merely showboating. So in either case, the Jan Lokpal bill becomes its own worst enemy. It's just doing nothing. In one case, it's maintaining the status quo. In the other case, it's becoming something completely draconian.
So what we should be attempting to do is to find the middle path between what the Jan Lokpal bill attempts to do and what the government bill does not attempt to do.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the government Lokpal bill leaves many, many holes that need to be covered. The Jan Lokpal bill is perhaps gone too far the other way, but there's much more to be taken from the Jan Lokpal bill than there is from the government bill. CVC, CBI, ACB, India's battle against corruption is an abbreviated one. Let's start with the Central Vigilance Commission. Established in 1964, it investigates complaints of corruption against the higher bureaucracy, that's Class A officers. The CVC has supervisory powers over the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation, that traces its origin to the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act 1946. The CBI has powers to investigate central government officials and public sector employees. But neither the CVC nor the CBI can move against a public official without the sanction of the government, a protection offered by the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988.
You look at the CVC, about which there was such a big, so much propaganda, the Central Vigilance Commission, and in the states you have the State Vigilance Commissions. You go to their website. They don't even have power to really inquire. They have no staff. So they give the inquiries to the CBI. A complaint comes to them, they act like a post office and they give it to the CBI. Or they write to the state governments and say, we recommend charge sheeting this officer. And the state government doesn't do it. So in the annual report they say we got 500 letters, we replied to 400 letters, 300 state governments letters were supposed to be acted upon by the state governments, and they acted only upon 25. That's all. I mean, it's a joke.
Supposing you file a complaint against, let's say, an officer of joint secretary and above rank in government, even before a preliminary inquiry, what CBI calls a PE, even before a preliminary inquiry can be instituted, the permission of the concerned department has to be taken. So now there itself there are delays. Then after the preliminary inquiry permission is granted, the CBI investigates. They find, let us say, a good case, a strong case that the person has indulged in corrupt activity. Before you can prosecute, again the permission is required to be sought.
The number of sanctions that are required for those laws to kick in, and the omnipresent and all-pervasive influence of government on the institutions that are supposed to enforce those laws is so high that there is absolutely no incentive for anybody to do the right thing. And that is the core argument for having a Lokpal bill.
In doing so, India can draw from several international examples.
The Independent Commission Against Corruption, the ICAC.
Hong Kong's Independent Commission Against Corruption is amongst the best-known success stories of its kind.
During the 60s and early 70s, bribery was a normal way of life for many policemen and civil servants. The thousands of unfortunate people who got squeezed as a result learned to suffer in silence and swallow their anger.
Established in 1974, the ICAC employs a three-pronged approach: law enforcement, corruption prevention, and community education.
There are a few key points to the success of the ICAC. I think the first one is accountability. There is only one organization in Hong Kong that's responsible for corruption, and that's the ICAC. And when you are able to easily identify the body that's responsible for corruption, then I think it is much easier to make sure that the responsibility falls on that organization. I think number two, there is independence for the ICAC. They only report to the Chief Executive and the Executive Council in Hong Kong, which is the highest level of the executive branch in Hong Kong. And I think the third reason for their success is actually the fact that they are extremely well funded. They're extremely well resourced.
With over 1,370 employees, the Hong Kong ICAC investigated 3,427 corruption reports last year, covering public officials and private sector employees. It is also trusted with ensuring free and fair elections. Part of the Commission's success can be attributed to the wide-ranging investigative powers it has. Powers including interception and surveillance, search and seizure, arrest and detention, and granting bail. But in balance, the ICAC does not have prosecution powers.
I think the fact that they have to submit cases to the Secretary for Justice before a decision can be made about prosecution is actually one of the reasons why the ICAC has been successful. Because what happens is that when they have to put that case for consideration by the prosecutors, then the onus is on the ICAC to make sure that they do a sufficiently robust investigation and that there is going to be enough evidence that will be sufficient to satisfy a prosecutor.
Is the temptation getting too much? Don't even think about accepting these, or you'd be walking a tightrope.
Enjoy the meal. Vote for me.
Here's a little something.
Selling a corruption-free Hong Kong. The ICAC's aggression and marketing savvy is visible in these advertisements, and its popularity in the fact that 74% of complaints made last year were non-anonymous.
Prosperous. Report corruption.
Down under in New South Wales, a younger ICAC does a similar job to equal acclaim.
The ICAC was introduced over 20 years ago. It was at a time in the history of New South Wales where there had been several scandals involving very high-profile people being involved in corruption. They'd had the chief Stoke-Hendry magistrate involved in corruption, and a former minister had been jailed for corruption. So right from the beginning, it was recognised that the ICAC needed extensive powers, and it was given those powers, including the powers to use telephone intercepts, to use surveillance devices, to require people to come into hearings and to answer questions, to override privilege.
To balance that, the New South Wales Commission, just like the one in Hong Kong, has no prosecution powers.
Mr Gammage told Mr Blackadder that he wanted him to act as his agent in getting the job, and that he was prepared to pay him $15,000 for this service.
And so, even though its mandate is to investigate and expose corruption in all public sector agencies, government departments, Parliament, Judiciary, the Governor and the state's Premier, the ICAC's powers are only recommendatory.
The recommendations are not binding because in the case of criminal prosecutions, the Director of Public Prosecutions is an independent authority and has to have the right to decide whether there's sufficient evidence. But the ICAC does have a memorandum of understanding with the Director of Public Prosecutions, and we do work closely with them in respect of matters referred over to make sure that they have the evidence they need to prosecute the matter if they decide to do so. In the case of employers, we can only recommend disciplinary action, but we can follow up, of course, if we're not satisfied that appropriate action has been taken, and call for reports about why action hasn't been taken.